Okay, let's set the scene. It's the 1850s, and the United States is, well, it's a nation that's literally splitting at the seams. And the issue tearing it apart? Slavery. As the country keeps pushing west, every single new piece of land becomes this high-stakes battleground over one single explosive question. Is it going to be a free state or a slave state?
So that brings us to the central question here. How can a law that was actually designed for peace end up igniting a war? We're going to dive into how one single piece of legislation, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which was supposed to be a nice, democratic solution, instead ended up just pouring gasoline on an already raging fire. It's what pushed the country right to the brink of the Civil War.
All right, so to really get why this one law was such a bombshell, we've got to back up a little. You have to understand the incredibly fragile balance the country was trying to keep. It was like a political tightrope walk between the pro-slavery and anti-slavery states.
For decades, the go-to move was always compromise, and the perfect example of this is the Missouri Compromise of 1820. The deal was pretty simple, a classic political maneuver, really. You let Missouri in as a slave state, and at the same time, you bring in Maine as a free state. Boom, the numbers stay even in the Senate. But the really crucial part was this. It drew a line, the 36-degree 30 parallel, right across the map, and the rule was no slavery north of that line. For over 30 years, that line held a very, very fragile peace.
But, that piece was always on shaky ground. Because under the surface, you had two fundamentally different, clashing visions for what America should be. In the North, you've got this booming industrial economy. They wanted to stop slavery from spreading. But in the South, the whole economy was agrarian, built on the backs of enslaved people. For them, expanding slavery wasn't just a choice. They saw it as essential for their survival. So we're not just talking about a simple disagreement here. These were two opposing worlds totally locked in a political standoff.
And now we get to the main event, the thing that shattered that stalemate. Because in 1854, a new law comes along that's going to completely blow up the old rules and destroy that fragile peace for good.
And here it is, the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. The main guy behind it was Senator Stephen Douglas from Illinois. Now, Douglas was a political heavyweight, and his big goal was to get those Western territories organized to help the nation expand. He was absolutely convinced he'd found the perfect, democratic solution to just sidestep the whole messy slavery debate and get things moving.
So what was his big idea? It was a concept called popular sovereignty. And honestly, on the surface, it sounds pretty simple, right? Even fair. The idea was, hey, instead of a bunch of politicians in Washington, D.C. drawing lines on a map, let's let the actual people who move to these new territories vote on it. Let them decide for themselves if they want slavery or not. I mean, it's democracy in action. What could go wrong?
So let's break down what this act actually did. 1. It carved out two brand new territories, Kansas and Nebraska. 2. It put that shiny new idea, popular sovereignty, into action. But here's the kicker, the third and most important part. To do all this, it had to explicitly repeal the Missouri Compromise. That line that had kept the peace for 30 years, gone. Just like that. In an instant, the old rulebook was thrown out the window.
So this law was supposed to solve a political problem in Washington. Instead, it did the exact opposite. Its immediate result wasn't debate, it was open warfare on the ground. It turned the plains of Kansas into an actual bloody battlefield.
Think about it. With the future of slavery now hanging on a single vote, the act kicked off this frantic race. All that abstract political debate was over. This was now a ground war to see who could get more of their own people into Kansas, stuff the ballot box, and claim the territory for their side.
And so you had these two opposing armies of settlers rushing in to claim Kansas. From the south, you had pro-slavery folks pouring over the border, especially from Missouri. They got the nickname Border Ruffians, and they were dead set on making Kansas a slave state. And from the north, you had anti-slavery settlers, the Free Staters, often funded and sent by abolitionist groups who were just as determined to keep Kansas free. So you've got two groups, both armed, both absolutely convinced they are fighting for the very soul of America, all converging on the exact same piece of land. The idea that this was all going to be settled with a nice, peaceful vote, well, that became a fantasy pretty much overnight. Compromise was out, conflict was in.
This brutal, chaotic time quickly got a very fitting and very grim nickname, Bleeding Kansas. And that's exactly what it was. It wasn't a formal war, not yet, but it was absolutely a small-scale civil war. It was fought with fraudulent elections, intimidation, burning down towns, and murder. This was the terrifying preview of what was to come, years before the official start of the Civil War. And the violence just escalated so quickly. First, you have a pro-slavery mob that attacks and burns the anti-slavery town of Lawrence. Then, in a horrific act of retaliation, the abolitionist John Brown and his followers drag 5 pro-slavery settlers from their cabins and kill them, and that just set off this vicious, unstoppable cycle of raids and guerrilla warfare that completely engulfed the territory.
Now this violence, it didn't just stay in Kansas. The shockwaves of the chaos and the bloodshed there radiated across the entire country. It fractured national politics and pushed the whole nation right to its breaking point.
The national fallout was just immense. The divide between North and South became a chasm. Any faith in peaceful compromise? Completely destroyed. And this is huge. Out of the chaos, a brand new political party was born, the Republican Party, founded on one core idea: stop the spread of slavery. And that breakdown of polite civil debate, well, it was about to get shockingly literal, even in the halls of Congress. Get this. Senator Charles Sumner gives this fiery anti-slavery speech, calling the whole situation the crime against Kansas. A few days later, a pro-slavery congressman, Preston Brooks, walks right onto the Senate floor and beats Sumner so brutally with a heavy cane that he almost dies. Right there in the U.S. Senate. If you needed a sign that civil debate was dead, that was. So when you look at the legacy of this act, the irony is just staggering. The intended outcome was a peaceful, democratic solution to the slavery question. But the actual outcome? Widespread violence, total political chaos, and the creation of a powerful new anti-slavery party. It was a complete and utter disaster.
What Bleeding Kansas really demonstrated when all was said and done was that the division over slavery was just too deep. It couldn't be settled by a vote. The experiment of popular sovereignty had failed catastrophically, proving that the gap between North and South couldn't be bridged with ballots anymore.
And that leaves us with one last, really sobering question to think about. After Kansas, after compromise had so clearly failed and the political system had broken down into actual physical violence, was the Civil War inevitable at that point? Was there any peaceful path left to take?